Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Maurice, and if you're new here, hi, welcome. If you are new here, I talk about missing children in my channel. So I have a new case for y'all today. With that being said, I did not remember that tomorrow was Christmas. I thought Christmas was next week. That's how much I know that I'm lost. Like, this month has gone so fast. This year to me has gone slow, but the month of December has gone fast. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I can't believe the year is almost over. So with that being said, today I have a missing case. I don't know if y'all saw my last video, but I usually do not skip cases. I do have a list of all the missing children that I want to talk about, but today I decided to do a missing case of not one child, siblings who went missing during Christmas Day, and I'm going to upload it today just because tomorrow is the holidays and I'm going to be spending time with my family and my daughter, so I know that I won't have time to do it tomorrow. So we're going to be talking about the Sodder children and their weird disappearance, where I cannot come to a conclusion. Part of me thinks they're alive, part of me thinks they're not. But I will give you my opinion on what I think at the end of the video. And that's one thing that I kind of want to start doing too. I do kind of want to start giving my opinions on the videos that I talk about. And I'm just will be saying this at the beginning of each video. It's my opinion. Not a lot of people are going to agree with it, and that's fine. If you have your own opinion or your own theory, you could go ahead and leave it in the description box. Also, I'm gonna try my best to leave contact information if nobody knows anything, but usually it's hard with some of these older cases to find any information or anything like that. I usually do different website, like the children missing website, and then I usually use Wikipedia. That's one that I usually do when I do my missing videos. That's the one that I'm actually reading from. So let's go ahead and start with this video. Do not forget to subscribe. Go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I will really appreciate it. So let's go ahead and start. On Christmas Eve, December 24th of 1945, a fire destroyed the Sodder residence in Vettavilla, West Virginia, United States. At the time, it was a copy by George Sodder and his wife Jennie and 9 of their 10 children. During the fire, George, Jennie, and 4 of the 9 children escaped. The bodies of the other 5 children have never been found. The survivors Sodder family believe for the rest of their lives that the 5 missing children survive. Oh, so these are the missing: Maurice Sodder, age 14, Martha Lee Sodder, age 12, Louisa Sodder, age 10, Jennie Irene Sodder, age 8, and Betty Doll Sodder, age 6. So the Sodder never rebuilt the house, instead converting it to the site into a memorial garden to the lost children in the 1950s. As they came to doubt that their children had perished, the family put a billboard at the site along State Route 16 with a picture of the 5, offering a reward of information that would bring closer to the case. It remained standing until shortly after Jennie Sodder's death in 1989. Oh, so I was already born. It was like a year after I was born. In support of their belief that their children survived, the Sodder had pointed to a number of unusual circumstances before and during the fire. George disputed that the Fayetteville Fire Department, finding that the blaze was electric in Oregon, nothing that he had recently had the house rewired, and inspected. George and his wife suspect arson, leading to the theories that the children had been taken by the Salina Mafia, phrase in relation for George's outspoken criticism of the fascistic government of his negative Italy. So basically, I think a lot of people, when they do come across this case, he was from Italy, and I guess he wasn't an outspoken person like most people, and he must have said something about the government in Italy that they came and got the children. But to me, I think that one's not really, I don't believe that. I don't know why I don't, but I'm not from Italy, so I really don't know what was going on back then at that time in Italy. But I don't think that was, to me. It could be, it cannot be. But at the same time, if it was the government of Italy, wouldn't they also try to take him and his wife? If that makes sense. State and the federal efforts to investigate the case further in the early 1950s yielded no new information. The family did, however, later receive what may have been a picture of one of the boys as an adult during the 1960s. The last survivor daughter, along with their grandchildren, continued to publicize this case in the 21st century in the media and online. George Sodder was born with the name Giorgio Sodder in Tula, Sardegna, Italy, in 1895. He immigrated to the United States 13 years later, with an older brother who went back home as soon as both boys had cleared it custom at Ellis Island. For the rest of his life, George, as he came to be known, would not talk much about why he had left his homeland. Sodder eventually found work in the railroads in Pennsylvania, carrying water and other supplies to workers. After years, he took more permanent work as a driver in Syracuse, West Virginia. He then started his own trucking company, intentionally hauling filled dirt to construction sites, and later hauling coal mine in the region. Jennie Corpina, a storekeeper daughter in Simmers, who had also immigrated from Italy, and her childhood became George's wife. The Sodders settled outside near Belvedere, which had a large population of Italian immigrants, in a two-story timber frame house 2 miles north of town. In 1923, they had their first of their 10 children. George's business prospered, and they became one of the most respected middle-class families around, in the words of one local official. However, George had a strong opinion, expressing them sometimes, letting people, in particular his strident opposition to Italian director Benito Mussolini, sorry if I'm saying that, I'm not from Italy, sorry, had to lead to strong arguments with other members of the immigrant community. The last of the Sodder children, Sylvia, was born in 1942. By then, their second oldest son, Joe, 21, had left home to serve in the military during World War II. The following year, Mussolini was deposed and executed. However, George's criticism of the late director had left him some hard feelings. In October of 1945, a visiting life insurance salesman, after being referred, warned George that his house would go up in smoke and your children are going to be destroyed. I attribute to this all to the dirty remarks you have been making about Mussolini. And another visitor to the house assembly seeking work took the Caucasians to go around into the back and warned George that a prior of few bucks would cause a fire someday. So this is where I'm like so confused. Not confused, but I'm like in shock. You had two people that just came to your house and said, yeah, your house is about to be on fire. Even though the Mussolini of Italy got executed. Like I said, I don't know who he is. I never looked at him. I should have looked him up, but it's just like, I would be scared. Like, I would be terrified if somebody like came. I would have moved. Like, I would have moved my family out of the house. Mind you, I'm not blaming them. This is not their fault. But me, I would be scared. George was puzzled by the observation, since he had just had the house rewired. When an electric stove was installed, and the local electric company had said afterwards it was safe. And in the weeks before Christmas that year, George's older son had also noticed strange car parked along the main highway through town, and accompanies watching your younger Sodder children as they returned from school. So the Sodder family celebrated on Christmas Eve in 1945. Maureen, 19, the oldest daughter, had a band working at the dime store in downtown, and she surprised 3 of her younger sisters, Martha, 12, Jennie, 8, and Betty, 5, with the new toys she had brought for them as a gift. The younger children were so excited that they asked their mother if they could stay up past what would have been their usual bedtime. At 10 p.m., Jennie told them they could stay up a little later as long as the 2 oldest boys who were still awake, 14-year-old Mauricio and his 9-year-old brother Louis, remembered to put the cows and feed the chickens before going to bed themselves. George and the 2 oldest boys, John, 22, and George Jr., 16, who had spent the day working with their father, were already asleep. After reminding the children of those remaining chores, she took Sylvia upstairs with her and they went to bed together. The telephone rang at 12:30 a.m. Jennie went downstairs to answer it. The caller was a woman whose voice she did not recognize, asking for a name she was not familiar with. With the sound of laughter and clicking glass in the background, Jennie told the caller she had reached a wrong number. Later, recalling the woman's weird laugh, she hung up and turned to bed. As she did, she noticed that the lights were still on and the curtains were not drawn, 2 things the children normally attend when they stayed up later than their parents. Marino had fallen asleep in the living room couch, so Jennie assumed the other children who had stayed up later had gone back to the attic where they slept. She closed the curtains, turned out the lights, and returned to bed. And at 1 a.m., Jennie was again awakened by the sound of an object hitting the house roof with a loud bang, then a rolling noise. After hearing nothing further, she went back to sleep. After another half an hour, she woke up again, smelling smoke. When she got up again, she found that the room George used for his office was on fire around the telephone line and fuse box. Jennie woke him, and he turned to work his older sons. Both parents and 4 of their children, Marino, Sylvia, and John, and George Jr., escaped the house. The frantically yelled into the children upstairs, but heard no response. They could not go up there, as in the stairways itself was already in flame. So I'm guessing back then they didn't have fire detectors like in the houses like we do now. I'm guessing that they didn't have that back then. Can somebody let me know, please? I don't think they did. I'm assuming they didn't, but that's just me. He went up so sleeping there he later changed his story to say that he only called up there and did not actually see them. Efforts to find aid and rescue the children were unexpectedly complicated. The phone did not work, so Marina ran to the neighborhood house to call the Federal Fire Department. A driver on the nearby road had also been the flames and called from a Mary turbine. They too were unsuccessful, either because they could not reach the operator or because the phone there turned out to be broken. Either the neighbor or the passing murderers were eventually successful in reaching their fire department from another phone in the center of town. George barefoot attempted to climb the house outside wall and broke open window, cutting his arm in the process. He and his son intended to use a ladder to the attic to rescue the children, but it was not in his usual spot, resting against the house, and could not be found anywhere. A water barrier that could have been used to extinguish the fire was frozen solid. George then tried to pull up both of the trucks he used and his business up to the house and use them to climb the attic window, but neither of them would, despite having worked perfectly during the previous day. And this is what gets me crazy. This has to have been somebody that knew him or somebody in the neighborhood, because they couldn't find the ladder. Their phones wasn't working. The water hose were frozen. Well, mind you, it was snowing, so that's not something out of the ordinary. And then your trucks is not working. It had to somebody that knew them. It had to be. There's just no way. Frustrated, the 6 Sodders who had escaped had no choice but to watch the house burn down and collapse over the next 45 minutes. They assume other 5 children had perished in the blaze. The fire department low in manpower due to the war and relying on individual firefighters to call each other did not respond until that morning. FX Maurice said the next day that their already slow response was further hampered by his inability to drive the fire truck, requiring that he waited until someone could drive was available. The firefighters, one of them who was a brother of Jennie's, could do little but look through the ashes that were left in the Sodder basement. By 10 a.m., Maurice told the Sodders that they had not found any bones, as they may have been expected if the other children had been in the house as it burned. According to another account, they did not find bone fragments and internal organs. Those do not tell the family. It had also been noted by modern fire professionals that their search was a case of that best. Nevertheless, Maurice believed that the 5 children accounted for that had died in the fire, suggesting it had been hot enough to burn their bodies completely. Can somebody explain that to me? I should have paid attention in science, because that's one thing I think a lot of people that do research this case and stuff, it's just, can fire do that to you? Can like fire really burn your bodies with you even like not finding a bone? But I thought if you cremated people, wouldn't it be like white ashes, like sand? I don't know. Can somebody help me out with this one? Because that to me, it was confused. Maurice told George to leave the site undisturbed so that the state fire marshal's office could conduct a more thorough investigation. However, after 4 days, George and his wife could not bear the site anymore, so he bulldozed 5 feet of dirt over the site with the intention of covering the memorial garden for the lost children. Local coroner convened an inquest the next day, which held that the fire was an accident caused by faulty wiring. Among the jurors was the man who had threatened George that his house would be burned down and his children destroyed in tribute for his anti-Muslim remarks. Death certificates for 5 of the children were issued December 30. The local newspaper contradicted itself, stating that all the bodies had been found, but then later in the same story reporting that the only part of one body was recovered. George and Jennie were too grief-stricken to attend the funeral on January 2nd of 1946, although their surviving children did. And do not judge them. I don't want to see nobody up in my comments talking about like, oh, how can you not go to your own child's funeral? When you lose a child, if you never lost a child, you don't know what a parent goes through. And I think with them, it's like they want to believe so bad. They want to believe that their children is alive. And I'm sorry, but I agree with them. I personally think they're alive. I think these children are alive. I think that somebody came and got them. But I will tell you more about this in the end of the story. So not long afterwards, as they began to rebuild their lives, the Sodder family started to question all the official finding about the fire. They wondered why, if they had been caused by an electric problem, the family Christmas lights had remained on throughout the fire early stages, when the power should have gone out. Then they found the ladder that had been missing from the side of the house on the night of the fire at the bottom of an embankment 75 feet away. A telephone repairman told the Sodder that the house phone line had not been burned throughout in the fire, as they had intentionally thought, but cut by someone who had been willing and able to climb the 14 feet up the pole and reach 2 feet away from it to do so. A man who neighbors had seen stealing a block and an ankle from the property around the time of the fire was identified and arrested. He admitted to the theft and claimed he had been the one who cut the phone line, thinking it was a power line, but denied having anything to do with the fire. However, no record identifying this suspect exists, and why he would have wanted to cut the family entity lines to the Sodder house while stealing the block and tackles has never been explained. Jennie said in 1968 that if he had cut the power line, She and her husband, along with the other 4 children, would never have been able to make it out of the house. Jennie also had trouble accepting Maurice's beliefs that all traces of the children's body had been burned and completely in the fire. Many of the household's appliances had been found still recognizable in the ashes, along with the fire garments of the thin roof. She consecrated that the result of the fire with the newspaper account of the similar house fire that she read around the same time that killed a family of 7. Skeleton remains of all the victims were reported to have been found in that case. Jennie burned small piles of animal bones to see if they would be completely consumed. None ever were. And an employee of the local cremation she contacted told her that human bones remain even after the bodies are burned of a 2000 Fahrenheit for 2 hours, far long and hotter than the house fire could have been. The Sodder truck's failure to start was also considered. George believed they had been tampered with, phrased by the same man who stole the block in Tinkle and cut the phone line. However, one of George's sons-in-law told the Charleston Gas Millie in 2013 that he had come to believe that the Sodder and his sons may had, in their haste to start the trucks, fluid with engines. Soon, some accounts have suggested the wrong number phone call to the Sodder house may had also somehow been connected to the fire. However, investigators later located that woman who had made the call. She confirmed it had been a wrong number on her part. So it didn't come to you to go to the cops. They had to go find you. That's fishy to me. As spring approached, they Sodder, as they had said they would plant flowers in the soiled boulders over the house. Jennie tended it carefully for the rest of her life. However, further developments in early 1946 reinforced the family's belief that the children they were memorialized may in fact be alive somewhere. Evidence soon emerged indicating that the fire had not started in an electric fault and was instead deliberated. The driver of the bus that passed through Fayetteville late Christmas Eve said he had seen some people throwing balls of fire at the house. A few months later, when the snow had melted, Sylvia found a small, hard, dark green rubber ball-like object and brush nearly. George recalling his wife's account of loud thump on the roof before the fire. She said it looked like a pineapple bomb, hand-grenade, or some inserting device used to combat. The family later claimed that the counter to the fire marshal's conclusion that the fire had started on the roof, although by then there was no way to prove it. Other witnesses claimed to have seen the missing Sodder children themselves. One woman who had been watching the fire from the road said she had seen some of them peering out of the passing car while the house was burning. Another woman at the rest stop between Fayetteville and Charleston said she had served them breakfast the next morning and note the presence of the car with Florida lights in place in the red stop parking lot as well. And the Sodders hired a private investigator named C.C. Tenlis from the nearby town of Guella Bridge to look in the case. Ternelisa found information that the family had insured Selman, who had threatened George over his anti-Muslim statement, had been on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire an accident. He also learned of rumors. I'm so sorry, guys. Fetty that disappeared. His report to the Sodder that no remains had been found in the ashes. Maurice had found a heart which he later packed into a mailbox and secretly buried it. Maurice had apparently confessed this to a local minister, who in turn confirmed it to George. George and Tenlisas went to Maurice and confronted him with the news. Maurice agreed to show the two where he had buried the metal box, and they dug it up. They took what they found inside the box to a local funeral director, who, after examining it, told them it was radish fresh beef liver that had never been exposed to fire. Later, more rumors concluded around Fayetteville that Maurice had afterwards admitted the box with the liver had indeed not come from the fire originally. He has supposedly placed it there in the hope that the Sodders would find it and be satisfied that the missing children had indeed died on the fire. On one occasion, George saw a magazine photo of a group of young ballet dancers in New York City, one of whom looked like his missing daughter Betty. He drove all the way to the girls' school, where his repeated demands to see the girl himself was refused. George also tried to investigate with the FBI, investigating what he considered a kidnap. FBI Director J. Guire Hoover personally responded to his letters. Although I would like to be the service, the matter related appears to be a local character and does not come within the investigating jurisdiction of the Bureau. If the local authorities request the Bureau's assistance, he would of course direct the agents to the assist, but the Fairbury Police and Fire Department declined to do so. And in August of 1949, George was able to produce Oscar Hunter, a Washington, D.C. pathologist, to supervise a new search through the dirt of the house site. After a very thorough search, artifacts including a dermary that had belonged to the children and some coins were found. Several small bones fragment was underneath, determined to have been human vertebrae. The bone diagrams were sent to the marshal's team, Newman, a specialist submission instruction. They were confirmed to be lumbar vertebrae, all from the same person. Since the transfer says are fused the age of this individual, all at the death should have been 16 or 17 years. Newman reports said that the top limbed age should be about 22, since the center, which normally fused of 23, are still unfused. Thus, given these age range, it was not very likely that these bones were from any of the 5 missing children, since the oldest, Maurice, had been 14 at the time. Although the report allowed the vertebrae of boys his age, sometimes were advanced enough to appear to be at the lower and the end of their age. Newman added that the bones should show no signs of exposure to flame. Further, he agreed that it was very strange that those bones were the only ones found, since a wood fire of short duration should have left full skeletons of all the children behind. The report concluded that the vertebrae had instead most likely come from the dirt that George had used to bulldoze in the site. Later, Tinsley supposedly confirmed that the bone fragment had been from a cemetery in nearby Mountain Hope, but could not explain why they had been taken from there or how they came to be at the site to be at the fire site. The submissions returned the bone fragment to George in September of 1949. According to these records, the current location is unknown. The investigator in his findings attracted national attention, and the West Virginia legislature held 2 hearings on the case in 1950. Afterwards, however, Governor Oakley He Peterson and State Police Superintendent W.E. Birch told the Sodder the case was hopeless and closed, and it has at the state level. The FBI decided it had jurisdictions as possible and investigate kidnapping, but dropped the case after 2 years of following fruitless leads. With the end of official efforts to resolve the case, the Sodder family did not give up hope. They had flyers printed up with the pictures of their children, offering a $5,000 reward, soon double, for information that would have settled the case for even one of them. In 1952, they put up a billboard at the site of the house and another along the USA Route 60 near instead, with the same information. It would in time become a landmark for traffic throughout Belleville on USA Route 19, today State Route 16. The family efforts soon brought another report sighting of their children after the fire. 8 Crutchfield, a woman who ran Charleston Hotel, claimed to have seen the children apparently a week afterwards. I don't remember that exact day, she said in statement. The children had come in room around midnight with 2 men and 2 women, all of whom appeared to be of Italian extraction. When she attempted to speak with the children, One of them men looked at me in a hostile manner. He turned around and began talking repeatedly in Italian. Immediately, the whole party stopped talking to me. She recalled that they left the hotel early the next morning. Investigators today do not, however, consider her story credible, as she had only first seen photos of the children 2 years after the fire, 5 years before she came forward. George followed up leads in person traveling to the areas from where tips had come. A woman from St. Louis, Missouri, claimed Martha was being held and convicted there. A bar platoon in Texas claimed to have overheard 2 other people making crediting statements about the fire that happened in Christmas Eve in the West Virginia. Some years before, none of those proved significant when George heard later that the relative of Jennie's in Florida had children that looked similar to his. The relative had to prove the children were his own before George was satisfied. In 1967, George went to the Houston area to investigate another tip. A woman there had written to the family saying that Louise had revealed her true identity to her one night after having too much to drink. She believed that he and Maurice were both living in Texas somewhere. However, George and his son-in-law, Groove Patterson, were unable to speak with her. Police there were able to help them find the 2 men she indicated, but they denied being the missing sons. Patterson said years later that they doubts about that Diano Ligrange in George's mind for the rest of his life. Another letter that they received that year brought the Sodder what they believed was the most credible evidence that at least Louisa was still alive. On the day, Jennie found in the mail a letter addressed to her postmarked in Central City, Kentucky, with no return address. Inside was a picture of a young man around 30 with features strongly resembling Louisa's. Luis, who would have been in his 30s if he had survived. On the back was written, Luis Sodder, love brother Frankly, little and Ely boys. The family hired another private detective to go to Central City and look into this massive, but he never reported back to the Sodder, and they were unable to locate him afterwards. The picture nonetheless gave them hope. They added to the billboard, leaving Central City out of it, and another publisher informed out of fear that Louis may come to harm, and put an enlargement of it over their fireplace. George admitted to the Charleston Gazette Mail later that the next year that the lack of information had been like hitting a rock wall. We can't go any further. He nevertheless vowed to continue. Time is running out for us, he admitted, and another interview around that time. But we only want to know if they did die in the fire. We want to be convinced. Otherwise, we want to know what happened to them. George Sodder died in 1969. Jennie and her surviving children, except John, who never talked about the night of the fire, escaped to say that the family should accept what happened and move on with their lives. Continue to seek answers to the questions about the missing children. Faith. After George's death, Jennie stayed in the family home, putting up fencing around it and adding additional rooms. For the rest of her life, she wore black in mourning and attended the garden at the side of the former house. After her death in 1989, the family finally took the worn billboard down. The surviving Sodder children, joined by their own children, continued to paralyze the case and investigate leads. They, along with older Federal residents, had theorized that the Saline Mafia was trying to extort money from George, and the children may have been taken by someone who knew about the planned arson and said that they would be safe if they left the house. They were possibly taken back to Italy. If their children had survived all those years and were aware that their parents and siblings had survived too, the family believed they may have avoided contact in order to keep them from harm. Sylvia Sodder Patterson, the youngest of the surviving Sodder siblings, died in 2021. She was in the house on the night of the fire. which she said her earliest memory. I was the last one of the kids to leave home, she recalled to the Garson Mail in 2013. She and her father often stayed up late talking about what may have happened. I experienced their grief for so long time. She believed that her siblings survived that night and assist with efforts to find them and paralyze the case. Her daughter said in 2006 she promised my grandparents she wouldn't let the story die, that she would do anything she could. And in the 27th first century of the family's efforts had come to conclude online forums like westsalutes.com and additional media coverage. The increase in the letter had led to some who have examined the case to believe that their children did in fact die in 1945. George Bragg, a local author who wrote about the case in 2012, book West Virginia Unsolved Murders, believes that John was telling the truth in his original account when he said he tried to physically awaken his siblings before fleeing to the house. He allows that the conclusion may still not be correct. Logically tells you they probably did burn in the fire, but you can't always go by logical. Stacy Horn, who did the statement on the case for National Public Radio around his 60th anniversary in 2005, also believes the children's death in the fire is the most popular solution. In a contemporaneous post on her blog with material she had to cut from the stories for a time, she noted that the fire had continued to Sodder all night after the house collapsed, and that the 2 hours was not enough time to research the ashes thoroughly. Even if it had been, the firefighters may not have known what to look for. However, she said, there's enough genius awareness about his whole thing that if someday it is learned that the children did not die in the fire, I won't be shocked. In 2022, the History Channel aired an episode of a series History Greatest Mystery that delayed the events of the case. And that is the sad, heartbroken story of the Sodder family. I really do think they're alive. I think they're alive. I think somebody came, got them out, took it back to Italy, and they probably just not know that they're missing. They don't know that they're missing. They don't know that they had family around. Or they do know. I mean, mind you, this case was huge. So the siblings probably did know that they have family that survived the fire. But they're probably trying to protect their family. If that is the case, I think they're trying to protect their family. And as much as it hurt them, they don't want their family to be in danger. And they don't want someone to come and hurt their family. But I do still think that they're alive. I think they're just in Italy, and I think they just want to keep a low profile to keep the remaining family safe, just because they just don't want to have to see somebody in their family pass away because they decided to come back home, or they decided to to reach out to the surviving family. And this case to me is one of those cases that I feel like the parents did more than the detectives. I feel like the detectives really did not do a good enough job. I can not imagine what these two beautiful human beings that love their children to death had to go through every single day just trying to figure out what happened to their children. And I really don't think that they ever, from the time that they passed away, ever gave up. I mean, their father was driving. Any tip that they would get, the father would go and drive and just confirm the tip and investigate the tip. Not one detective decided to do that. And I think this is what makes me so broken. Why were the detectives not taking this case serious? Whether you believed or not that they're dead, it's still your job to find the leads, to find the answers, to come to a conclusion, figure out who did this. But y'all didn't. The mom and the dad did. And I cannot imagine the heartache that they had to go through every single day trying to find the answers that they need. And it's sad. And I really do hope that someday we'll be able to find the truth. I just don't have words for this case. This case is really just, it's broken. It's heartbroken. And just not knowing what happened to your sister. And I mean, I couldn't imagine just sitting, standing outside, seeing your own house burned, knowing that your children, or some of your children, are still in there. But I do kind of believe, I think they are alive, and I hope that one day they'll be able to come forward and, and let the family know what happened and why it took them so long to come forward with where they have been this whole time. I will be back again with a new case soon, guys. Y'all have a very, very Christmas day tomorrow. And have a happy New Year's if I do not post. If I don't post before New Year's. So, yeah. Love you guys.